All right, everyone. Thank you all for coming. We'll get started since it's 10:30 and we want to make sure we're on time. Like I said, thank you all for being here. We appreciate the time that all of you will kind of commit during the next 45 minutes or so. We've got a session, obviously, on analytics. Number of series that are going on here today. This one starts off the analytics session. So we've got, let's see, let me find my controller here. So session overview. This session isn't really about analytics itself. We didn't want to take the time. There's lots of entire day events and such that talk about analytics and what analytics are about. Really, the purpose of today's session is to talk about how do we get started? How do we create a starting point for analytics in our organizations that allow us to envision where we're going and get an understanding of really how do we progress from 0 maybe to 100. So one of the things that came up in the keynote, if you were there today, was Carlos talked about movies, that he likes to go to movies, and one of the movies he brought up was actually some of the more recent Marvel ones that are coming out. Does anyone know how Marvel has actually infiltrated everything that's been going on, or how they have come at us in terms of the approach that they've taken with their movies? Because I would guess most of you have seen there's Marvel movies coming out time after time. Not only that, they're on TV. They've got merchandise that's out regularly. And if you look into it, analytics is actually a big portion of what they've been doing. The whole movie industry, in fact, has been using analytics to better understand their audience and to adjust as they've been going. And the Marvel universe that's been created and now is owned by Disney actually makes use of, they've got a whole vision laid out for themselves. And many years ago they set this vision in place that they didn't want to just do one movie. They actually wanted to do a whole series of movies, and movies that were interconnected and tied into TV shows and tied into the merchandise that they put out and websites and social media. And it isn't that analytics was the driving force behind it. It was really the vision that they had for what they wanted to achieve. However, analytics is something that they've used in order to make adjustments and become a very successful kind of overall franchise within that whole industry. And so the question is really, so how did they get started? What is it that they did? And so I'm not going to say that any one of the three of us, and I'll introduce all of us in a moment here, but it's not that any one of us knows necessarily the secret behind what they did, but we have a guess. And really what we're talking about here today is that starting point. It's not what analytics in itself is. So the quick agenda, very high level, is we want to run through some challenges and an understanding of the challenges to actually getting analytics to be a successful program in an organization. We want to talk about the value of analytics and the approach, and it's really the culmination of all of this, the approach of how to get from this place of maybe not having an analytics program or maybe having an unsuccessful one to something that might be more successful in each one of your organizations. And then hopefully have some time for questions and discussion if there's any out there. Good to go? Make sense? Hear what you came for? If not, or stay. So real quickly, in terms of our speakers today, Jim Hasegawa, who's on the far end, he's the Deputy Director of Business Planning and Research, all-around super smart guy. He is one of the main driving forces behind the reason why analytics at Lottery is actually being successful. And there's a number of reasons for that, and we'll get more into that as we go. We've got Dan Peterson. He's the Director of Government Solutions at Performance Technology Partners, another super smart guy. He is here to really talk about that side of how do you get from a beginning place of maybe nothing to a program that you can begin to build upon. And then myself, Chris Riesen, I'm the Chief Information Officer at Lottery. I'm not really sure why I'm here because my degrees are in biology. So, all right, so let's get started. The real purpose, right, why we're here, like I said, is to really get through an understanding of challenges. And then I'll hand it off to Jim to talk about that value that we see at Lottery. And then Dan to kind of wrap it up and explain how to get from the challenges to that value. So I know this is hard to see. I checked it when I was out there, but what it is a guy standing at a big giant chalkboard. And my question for all of you is, have you or have business partners of yours or other people in your organizations felt this way trying to explain something, right? Where you've got all this information, you're trying to get through it all, you're trying to explain things, and it really just feels like you've got this massive stuff. And then feeling like this, right? Standing up here wide-eyed, trying to convince somebody of something. Feeling a bit of struggle. And the purpose, right, behind why we want to start putting analytics programs in place is really to maybe change this understanding. But a real quick question. Does anybody, besides a couple people in the back who I know, and Jim, know what this stuff is? You just raise your hands. All right. So these pictures are actually from a marketing campaign that Lottery did back in the fall timeframe called The Power of Five. I just used them because I thought they worked well in terms of the struggle of communicating about information and data. So, wouldn't it be nice to feel like this? Right? Have information that's easily understood, have people looking around, it be organized, being able to get concepts across and important information that allow people to make key decisions in the organizations. Right, so that's really kind of that underlying side to analytics. And I'm just kind of doing a quick review of analytics so we're all on the same page. There's this understanding of maturity when it comes to analytics, where you really start from a standpoint of data and converting data into information, and that information ultimately into knowledge and understanding and hopefully intuition in an organization. And that maturing is not something that you can just jump to the end on, right? You can't take an organization that really doesn't have an understanding of how to make use of data and all of a sudden translate it into these either prescriptive or predictive analytics that give you an understanding of exactly what decisions you need to make. There are steps to take and there's a path to go down in order to build that maturity in organizations. And it's an important path to go down. And it's important to not try and jump ahead. And so there's probably various views of how I might take an organization and kind of profile them. This is just kind of one view of looking at the different ways I might kind of classify an organization in terms of their maturity. And I bring this up to kind of give you a sense of where Lottery's at, and it's really just an opinion. And in fact, I would say there's no organization exactly fits, say, one profile up here. It's really a matter of, there's different aspects of maturity in different areas when you start to build out an analytics program. And so if we look at Lottery, right, I would say in terms of, if we go back one slide, somewhere between a 2 and a 3, meaning, and I'll jump ahead again, you know, we're investing in reporting and analytical systems. We've got well-defined business drivers, and I'll come back to that a bit. We're working on data quality. It's an important aspect. We need to make improvements in terms of the data that we have about our lottery players and such. And data as a strategic asset in the organization is becoming better and better understood. We're putting more attention to it. We're understanding how to better manage it and better kind of control it and keep it clean and such, hence the quality piece. And so, like I said, you know, profiling an organization and kind of getting a sense of things just helps to sort of understand where you might be on that path. So, let's be real clear. This stuff is not easy. Analytics and building analytics in organizations is a difficult thing. I've seen a number of organizations struggle at it. I've seen a number of organizations not be real clear on how to move from one step to another. It's not about technology, right? The struggles, there's many tools out there and lots of things that you can make use of. But those tools don't give you the answers, right? You have to actually apply knowledge and information and important concepts into them and really have a starting place and a direction on where you want to go. And so there's challenges to all of this, right? There's challenges to putting in place a successful business intelligence and analytics program. And so that's really what I'm going to run through real quickly before I hand it off. So what are those challenges? Let's start with the first one. Business intelligence, analytics, these programs require vision and dedication. They require commitment and drive. They will not be successful if there is no one or no group that really understands them and is putting in place a vision for what purpose they really have in an organization. It is crucial to be able to have a reason why we would even spend time, and really why we spend money, because they're expensive as well. These programs require an articulate leader, a sponsor, a champion, some strategic partner in the organization. Doesn't matter what title they have, you can probably come up with 10 or 15 other ones. I look at Jim, and there's a great value, in my opinion, to all of you that he's here today to speak about it, right? Because he is one of these people, if not this person, in lottery. He understands this stuff, he knows why it's valuable, and he's driving a reason behind and growing its success in the organization. It's a requirement. You have to have someone that understands it in order to move it forward. And it's a challenge to be able to find those people. These programs require strong, understandable, clear, whatever other words you want to throw in there, business drivers, right? We've seen events, and we've probably attended them, I'm sure a number of you have, or sessions like this where it's about the goodness of analytics and there's lots of reasons why we want to do all of this. It's absolutely critical in my mind that having business drivers that are key or specific to your organizations to help understand really why we would even tackle any of this and what are the more specific things that we're really trying to achieve are understood, and that there's something that can live through the life of the program. Really, what's driving it? Why would we even do this stuff? The fourth challenge is really about the ability to have focused, achievable objectives. We've seen programs, probably, whether analytics or not, that really don't have well-defined objectives and are really, they begin to struggle in terms of what it is that they are trying to do on a day-to-day basis, or how to build themselves, how to mature, where are they really headed to. And so having achievable objectives is important. Typically in the beginning, they're smaller, right? Something that can be understood and really tackled and create some sense of success. But one of the interesting things about analytics programs is also that there's a need for flexibility. As you begin to put analytics in place and you begin to learn more, there's a need to make course corrections and adjustments. And not all of our organizations are very flexible when it comes to this sort of change that may need to occur. We like to have well-defined scopes, and we like to have this end goal, and that's where we're going. And sometimes we need to make adjustments when we learn more, and that's what analytics is really about. Getting more information, making good decisions. So having direction, but also being able to be flexible. And then the last challenge that I really want to talk about is knowledge and skill. These are not easy things to find in government. In fact, they're not easy things to find outside of government. The skills related to analytics, understanding research, right? Understanding how to interpret data and tell the story that really lies within that data. Those are difficult things to do. Every organization is looking for people to be able to do this stuff these days, whether it's Marvel or whether it's lottery or whether it's whomever else. And so one, it's hard pressed to find people with the knowledge and skills. Two, there's an aspect of, even though people may have that, they may not understand the business that you're in. And so having someone that truly understands the business and has that knowledge to be able to apply is critical. And once again, not something that's real easy to do. So a quick question. You all have been so talkative already. Are there other challenges that all of you have seen that you would throw up there? Something that you think has either prevented or caused struggle within your organization to doing analytics?
Data integrity.
Yep. Data integrity is a difficult thing. There's a need to ensure that the data that we're working off of is something that will provide us good insight once we actually make use of it. Definitely. And we're working on that right now at Lottery.
System infrastructure.
Being able to actually have everything in place, absolutely. My last organization I was at, we've got a whole lot of tools and a lot of technology, and the weight of that was actually difficult to manage on a regular basis.
I think getting people to share, if you have somebody with that business knowledge or even technology knowledge, getting them to open up and share is not always easy. Making it institutionalized rather than individualized.
And that, so sharing of information, right, and sharing of skill can be difficult within our organizations. When we start to get talking about analytics outside, that make use of data and information and such from other organizations, I hear horror stories about people trying to create, agreements between government organizations within the state. We're all working for, in essence, the same entity, and that's a big struggle. And I hear about that over and over again, absolutely.
Having people who understand what data we have, the data set,
Absolutely. So being able to even know what data assets are in existence and be able to locate them, be able to find knowledgeable people who can speak to them, and being able to understand what data we don't have and where we might be able to get it as well. So obviously, right, not easy things to do. You'll notice none of the challenges that I threw up there, and in fact most of what we talked about here, we're not talking about the tools being the challenge, right? We're really talking about everything outside of those tools. So I'm going to hand it over now to Jim. Like I said, Jim, super smart guy. One of the values that Jim brings to the Lottery, and he's been there for decades, is exactly that. Jim understands the Lottery. He's been in different parts of the organization. He understands kind of all of the different perspectives that exist there and the different ways that the organization operates. But he adds to that an understanding of research and an understanding of analytics and the value and power that they can bring to the organization. And so all of this culminates in his ability to lead our business planning and research part of the organization and really achieves, important, valuable steps to take when it comes to analytics and bringing information to the organization that's truly important for what we're trying to do. So I'll hand it off to Jim now.
All right, thanks, Chris. All right, so, if you're going to invest the time and the money into an analytics program, you must ensure that it provides value to your organization. You're not just trying to deliver data. I think people talk about data, but with an analytics program, what you're really going to try and deliver is, insights, usable information, or actions that ultimately help your organization, the business side of your organization. So when selecting the issue to try and tackle, it's real important to look at certain factors to choose certain things. And that's what we've done at the lottery. So we first looked at an important issue, something that's very critical for our success, something that's a definite problem that we're trying to solve within the organization. The next area in terms of picking out what issue to tackle to have analytics solved is it's a very focused, well-defined question that we're dealing with. It can't be too large or amorphous because then it's really hard to tackle it from an analytics side. And the third thing is that we already have good data, we've been using the data at least, so we're familiar with it. It's not the programs that we're doing analytics with, it's not the first time we've used that data. So we've done it through some reports and so forth. And before I go on to talk about some examples at the lottery, let me kind of make sure that have me better define what I mean by analytics. And to do this, let me show you this little chart that kind of talks about the evolution. So at the bottom you can see, almost all organizations have reports, right? Standard reports that come out of a system and so forth. And then gradually with business intelligence, you might graduate up to like ad hoc reports and drill downs and alerts and so forth. And we've been doing that quite a bit for some time at the lottery. But now we're moving into more advanced analytics, and that's what I'll be providing examples for today, dealing with predictive forecasting or predictive modeling, being able to predict what will happen, or being able to optimize the situation, and all of that. So that's the analytics side. And so as you can see, we'll talk a lot about this evolution in all the examples that I'm providing. So the first example, just in case you probably don't know that much about our business, is the business side. You might know about the products, hopefully. If you're like any audience, about 50% of you should have played the lottery in the past year, because our statistics show that about half of California adults do participate in the lottery in a given year. But on the business side, let me give you a little background. An average retailer sells between 20 and 24 different types of scratcher games. We have different price points of games. We have different themes. We have different colors. We have different ways you play them. And that's because different people like different things. It's no different than other consumer packaged goods or marketers. Why are there 5 different flavors of Oreos or Fig Newtons, or why are there 31 flavors at Baskin Robbins, right? Consumers want choices. And so it's important that we have this variety, and we found that this variety optimizes our sales. So in terms of you were a retailer for the lottery, on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, we ship you scratcher tickets to replenish your inventory levels. But as you can see in the picture there, out-of-stock situations do occur. That's what those little red arrows indicate. And those red circles show lost opportunities. Those are lost sales. Because if a consumer comes in and doesn't see their favorite game or a game they want to play, they may not necessarily just choose something else. They might walk away, and therefore we've lost a sale, and that lottery retailer has lost a sale. So talking about the evolution a little bit, right now we do have reports, right? We have actually reports that generate daily, telling people within our sales division that deals with the inventory area that a particular retailer is out of inventory of a game and so forth. But what we're working on right now, and we're in the kind of the final stages of this, is to build a predictive model that will forecast that out-of-stock situation 5 days in advance based on patterns of sales and inventory levels. So in the future, what we're going to have is the analytics. This model will alert the people in sales in advance so they can take corrective action. So that out-of-stock situation, that red circle with that empty scratcher's bin that I showed you earlier, would not have occurred at all, because we're going to take corrective action before that out-of-stock situation occurs. So what that results is we'll have increased sales. We won't have frustrated consumers looking for their favorite game, or it could be the game that we currently advertise and they can't get it at their local store, so they would be frustrated about that. And also our retailers will have improved service because they aren't losing sales, they aren't out of inventories of the tickets that their customers want. So that's one example of how analytics is solving a very important problem. One of the issues that retailers complain to our sales reps is the fact that, I don't have the right mix of games and so forth. My customers aren't happy. So it was an important and very visible problem within the organization that costs us money and loses revenue for us. And so that's how we determined how to tackle it. And as I said, we currently have alerts or reports on it. So there is data. We've been working with this data in the past, so staff is very familiar with it. So it was a good transition to have this issue move on to apply some advanced analytics to. So I'll give you some other examples. Maybe it won't take quite as long with each of these. But the next one deals with the call center, our call center. And just so you know, for us at the lottery, our call volume into our call center isn't just a function of the day of the week it is or the time of day. It's more than that. Because when we launch a new game, when we have a certain type of promotion for a game, if we have changes to certain things in our system or maybe on our website, that's what generates a lot of questions in the minds of our customers, our consumers. And therefore, those players flood calls into our call center. And as a result, we could have a long queue, a lot of waiting time. So right now, we do have reports coming out of the system. It can tell us the number of callers, the average length of time, the average length of the wait time, all those statistics that you can probably see a report generating. But that doesn't solve the problem. So in the future, what we want to try and do is develop a predictive model based on the different types of promotions we have, the different types of new games we launch, the different types of changes to our website, the different types of changes to our systems, and how those can impact call volume into the call center. And based on analyzing the past data, we'll be able to develop a predictive model that will allow us to then know if we launch this specific type of game, then we can expect a certain type of call volume coming into our call center. And as such, we can prepare in advance. We can adjust staffing so that we know we're going to have a lot more calls. So we don't have people frustrated at the end saying, I've been on hold or, for how long and so forth. So we can adjust our response or call staff to adjust to the demand of the callers. So that's another example. Third one deals with our players, because Chris talked a little about player data and so forth. So just to give you a little background and maybe a little sales pitch, since I used to work in marketing at one point, players right now can take their non-winning tickets, like for Scratchers, Super Lotto Plus, and Fantasy 5, and I'm going to talk about Scratchers as the example here. But you can take your non-winning Scratchers ticket and you can go online to our website and register those non-winning tickets for a second chance to win. And right now, we do weekly drawings, and the weekly drawings, every week we're giving out $100,000 in prizes ranging from $25,000 to $1,000. So with that, though, with that registration of all those tickets, our second chance program has a lot of data in it as a result. We know who's registering what tickets, when they're registering those tickets, what type of ticket it is, what game, what theme, what price point, and so forth. And so right now, yes, we do have reports that log in, the number of players that log into our second chance. We have reports about people who play certain games and all. But we want to do more than that. We want to use analytics to develop kind of player segments, different types of people. And with those segments, we're going to communicate directly to those players via customized email messages that meet their specific needs. And so the marketing message to that individual might be different than to somebody else. You've probably all experienced that because so many companies use this with the emails. If you compare it with others in your household or other family members, the email you get from a certain company might be very different than somebody else because it's reflecting maybe what you've bought from them in the past, how you've interacted with them, and all of that information goes into big data. and they mine that data to better understand you as a customer. And then they customize offers or marketing messages to you that you're more likely to appreciate. You're not, it doesn't make sense, since I am single and don't have any children, to get an email message about, well, now you can do this for your children, right? I wouldn't care. So a company that takes the time to understand their customers better, therefore the customer or the consumer feels that that company values them more. They take the time to send them customized information that they care about. So a person who only plays certain types of scratcher games, if there's a game that they really don't like, they don't want to see that information. That's not relevant to them. And that's what we want to move down the road with analytics with. That's a big area, everyone from Amazon to pretty much anyone that you deal with online uses this type of analytics approach in dealing with their consumers. So the benefit of this is that we'll be able to reduce ad spending to some of our player segments. So in other words, rather than use television to talk about a certain new game, we can market directly to players and do so. I'm a big Southwest Airlines person with Rapid Rewards and all, and I know that a lot of their advertising now has switched from talking about the fare between this city and this city, because I get that directly. They don't need to communicate in mass media vehicles to do so. Other examples, we'll talk about a few more if I have time. We're also working at, actually with our advertising agency, we're working on, we actually have models in place to optimize our advertising expenditures. We look at different media vehicles, whether they be television or radio or online advertising or outdoor, to find out which one is the most effective and cost efficient in different parts of the state, different media markets. And an analytics model does that. So we're able to know that where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. Which products are most responsive? We have lots of different products at the lottery. Some are more responsive to advertising, and it's better to invest advertising dollars against those products than other ones. And so that's areas that we're working on. Another area is dealing with creating a predictive model of retailer performance. If you didn't know this, we have over 21,000 different retailers across the state. And it does take a lot of time and resources to bring up a new retailer. So we want to aid in recruiting more potentially most successful locations by developing a predictive model that can take certain variables at a retail location and kind of forecast what type of retailer would this likely be. Is it worth the time and effort for us to recruit this individual to try and become a lottery retailer? The other purpose of this model is that if we have a predictive model that can essentially with certain variables such as the type of sales that store does for other products, the location, does it have parking, the retailer attitude, and so forth. If we're able to understand the different variables that influence a successful retailer, then we can identify retailers with greater potential that aren't meeting their current sales level. So for our existing retailers, we could look at their sales today, their actual sales, and compare it to this predictive model. And it shows that maybe in certain areas, lottery staff need to better engage the retailer or train the retailer or provide some other additional resources at that location because they're underperforming versus their true potential. So those were just some of the many examples that we're trying to apply analytics to predict and optimize environments rather than just report on them. I think everybody has reports and everybody has data, but really what's most important is taking that data and making it into very usable and actionable information and trying to, in this case, predict what will happen. So that way we try and don't have situations occur. As you can see, a lot of the stuff we're trying to do is very proactive rather than react to a situation. So we're trying to be proactive in that sense, and that's what analytics can do. Right. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
thanks. I think Chris and Jim have done an excellent job of explaining the challenges that come with analytics and the business value that's behind it. So why do we take on those challenges? Why do we do that? What's the real value that you get out of that? And what I want to go through now is what is an approach that could be taken that will make it more successful? We know that analytics is a powerful trending technology today. A lot of us have heard about it. A lot of us are implementing it in different places. But how do we go about that to make it most successful? So as I thought about this, I thought about what kind of analogies could we draw with this? You know, whenever you're building something, what's the best way to go about it? So I thought about lots of different things. And then it came to my mind, my brother is a civil engineer that works for an architecture firm. And he builds a lot of things. He builds city parks, he builds golf courses, he's built soccer stadiums, he's built a lot of things. So I called him up one day, and one Saturday, and I said, okay, so what are your steps when you go through building things like that? What type of approach do you take to make it successful? And so we had this 30, 40-minute conversation about it. So what I'm going to go through is kind of do a little analogy with building a golf course. After talking with him, what are the steps that you go through? Did a little research, and I bet a lot of you don't know, there's an American Society of Golf Course Architects. Okay, how many of you knew that existed before today? Well, they're there. And by the way, I didn't choose golf course analogy because I'm good at golf, because I am not. So raise your hand if you've ever played golf in the room. Yes, and how many of you are actually good at golf? Keep your hands up. Wow, okay, that's surprising. So I didn't choose it because of that, but they actually have this pattern they follow, a methodology that they go through. And so I'm not going to get into every detail of this, but it was interesting to me to see what they go through with choosing a golf course architect, site selection, land entitlements, and these things. Land planning is a big part of what they do. And they go through steps like you would in defining an analytics program, where they have a conceptual design and they have a master plan and refinement. And I'm going to show in a minute here how that kind of analogy might work for an analytics program that's being built as well. So there is a model there. They do all of this before they start building anything. So they come up with the construction documents when they're done, and then they start building things. So it was interesting. We see a lot that with analytics, a lot of organizations will go buy a tool and implement it. And the tools are great these days. There's a lot of really good tools on the market. But if you were going to build a golf course, you wouldn't necessarily start by purchasing a tool and going to design or build something. You're going to get a little bit more of a strategy around that. You're going to look at what the business value is, what are the drivers for that, and you're going to really get your arms wrapped around it before you start doing on that. It's the same pattern that we go through when you want to build an analytics program. Okay? So let's take a look at that real quick. And if you were to build an analytics program, okay, you have to have a vision to begin with. Choosing a golf course architect, well, choosing a strategic partner that may help you architect that analytics program could be very important. Site selection for them, okay? We've got business drivers in the IT world, in the business world. Jim did a great job of explaining what the business drivers are at the lottery. That's what's there. And then you've got program planning, the big steps here where you've got definition and conceptual design. You got to take a look at your operations. You're going to have to know what type of tools you're going to need, what type of specialties you're going to need. And as Chris talked about earlier, you know, what skill sets are you going to need to be able to make it successful? What about the data? We heard some of the concerns here earlier today about the data integrity and things like this. And there's a lot of tools that can help with that as well. So how do you get that where you need it to be? You want to feed in good data into your tools so that they come out, right? And then there are analytics tools that I mentioned before. So these steps are similar. There's governance, you know, financing is financing. Then you end up with not construction documents, but roadmap documents, you know, at the end of it. So what is the course that the organization is going to take? What are the steps they're going to do? What order are they going to do it in? What are they going to hit first? What's going to be the value of all those things? And you get to construction, and you get to finally your operations. And so you get to this picture that Chris showed earlier. But wouldn't we like to have that when we put it all together? But that's sort of the methodology or the pattern that you go through to get there that's been successful. This is what the lottery did with their program. And this shows the roadmap that was developed. So all of the things that Jim talked about earlier that they're doing now are really in those orange boxes there on the left side of this. Okay, but that was all mapped out previously before they started. And they were doing some things in there already, but kind of really got their heads around, okay, what do we need to support all this and to make it successful? So all the things that you see on the bottom of this here with the analytical engines, the enterprise information, governance, you have to have your governance models in place. You know, how are you going to share that data? Who's going to be in charge of it? Things like that. And so they've mapped out a 4-year course. So they're starting with these ones that are in the orange here on the left, with the examples that Jim went through with the games and the retailers, the players. Now move forward into the other years in the next 3 years coming up. So in essence, that's really a great way to go about it. And you can see on the right-hand side, what are the results that are trying to be achieved? What's the end goal? Okay. What's the outcomes that are going to come from this? And so they're starting to see some of those today at the lottery. So that's just kind of, an analogy of if you're going to build something like a golf course, how would you go about it? And here's a roadmap that you would start with. You wouldn't necessarily go out and purchase tools and things like that. So just to recap today, and then we might have time for a couple of questions, but what are the keys to success? So we all kind of sat down together and said, okay, what are the real keys that we want to get across here today? You need a business and an IT executive sponsor. This is the two of them from the lottery are sitting right up here, Jim and Chris. They've done that. They have to have that vision of the possibilities and passion to see it through. And having worked with Jim, I see that. He has that passion. Strategic partner becomes important. You wouldn't necessarily build a golf course without having an architect help you, someone that's gone and done it somewhere before and understands the pitfalls and things like that. You need your business goals to be clearly defined. What are you trying to achieve in the end? Okay, and then having an enterprise strategic mindset. Think about things in terms of not just this little organization or this little problem I'm trying to solve, but how can that be leveraged to help the whole organization as an enterprise do that. Early wins, if you get those help fuel things, those get people excited. It's kind of like if you had a golf course and you're building it and you want to get some marketing out there, get some people to come play, they start to get excited about it and the word gets going. That happens in the organizations as well. So in the end, this is really what we're talking about. There's a vision that can be achieved. You wouldn't necessarily start with a tool, although they're very, very powerful today and they're very useful in their right element. If you have that vision, what can happen is you can turn that into something like this that would be much more powerful, much more successful in the end. All right, I think we have a couple of minutes for questions. Are there any questions that anybody has for any of us up here? Yeah.
I really admire the person that came up with the second chance discussion. Because from what I can see, when I was registered, it took me what was happening here. From what I can see, the data that you reflected before was just the winners. Now you're collecting data from anybody who wants to participate in that second chance, which is a huge amount of information. And what we're really curious about is the colors on the scratchers. You guys are doing some analytics on that, and how that plays into what people buy based on just the color alone, not what the game is or anything.
That's some of the things we want to do in terms of segmentation of players, is understanding that. I mean, I know when we test, we do pre-test a lot of games, and colors and the graphic, maybe not the color specific, but graphics in general are a key driver in why people might try a certain game. But with the second chance data that's there, we can actually try and segment. There may be people who really gravitate to certain games of certain color, and we can see that by the pattern of what they've purchased in the past, and therefore we'll be able to make them aware of a new game that's coming up that is of that same color. So that will come in the phases as we start working with the player data and coming up with those segments by using the analytics modeling of that. Okay.
Other questions? I'll have time for one or two more. Yes.
Have you used your analytic skills to do predictive peer-to-peer models as far as fraud? Or is it just, a lot of the business side, I'm just thinking on the investigation and fraud side.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually did just have a meeting, and I know Chris has also had some meetings with our security and law enforcement side. And we're going to move in that. If you know, I don't know, it might not have been highlighted because it wasn't in the first center area. For our business, and again, it will vary from organization to organization. For some organizations, that type of thing is much more central. For our organization, it was not our first area to cover in the roadmap that Dan talked about. It's in there, but it's in the subsequent years, and so we're just starting to have early conversations with our security people on how we can help them through these analytics. That's the reason why it wasn't first up with us. It may be more relevant within your organizations.
Yeah, I was just going to point out there, that's the FWA down here, fraud, waste, and abuse, at the end there. So that is on the roadmap. But probably have time for one more question. Any other questions? Yes.
So more for Jim, like how did you get your organization to prioritize which top areas you want to solve? What business objectives?
Well, actually, both of us, because Dan was working with us on building that roadmap, and it's like interviewing lots of different people within the organization, and that's why we had somebody, not just me going, because since I'm within the organization, so that's somebody else interviewing people within the organization to kind of see their perspective, and then pulling it all together, and then kind of getting a shared consensus within the organization. I would admit, and Dan can probably speak better to this, I would admit probably it's a little easier within our organization because we have a very clear mission, we have a very clear goal in mind because of the profits of the lottery go to public schools and so forth. So it may have helped in our organization to get that consensus pretty quickly, I would say. I mean, it seemed pretty fast from my end.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, the early wins were key to that. So you could see which ones were kind of be the biggest bang for the buck to begin with. Lottery, they know their business very, very well. They can see retailers, one of the top things, and if you can reduce those out of stock, what that's going to do for them. If they can get their game optimized a little more, their games, then they can get more players in. And if they can really get to know their customer and their player better. So those were very important up front. And we went through a whole exercise with that, and we outlined that's why these things ended up in the order that they are here. And so that one concept though behind that was the early wins, to get momentum going. Did that answer your question? Yes? Okay, good. All right, I think that's probably about it. So thank you everybody for attending. If you did not get a handout, there's a few more on the table here, so feel free to take those. And thank you very much.